Corinne, happy Future Friday. I'm so excited to have you here. You've been a longtime friend from New York and many of our circles and investment circles, and now here today to share a little bit about your story and your journey, which I think is so inspiring. We both were at McKinsey, but ultimately, you took this incredible path of building in the world of like education and upskilling. So whether it was your role at like head of digital learning at Generation, you've also been an advisor to a number of different startups, university ventures, which I can't wait to dive into because it's a very cool concept. And then now at a chief partner. So it's really this incredible through line on education and skills and how we kind of transform the world. And so I can't wait to dive in with you. First, I'd love if you could share where you're calling in from today and what you're really focused on these days.
Alana, it's so great to see you. Thank you so much for having me. I am calling in from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I am currently an investor at Achieve Partners, which is investing in the future of learning and earning. Before I joined the investment world, I started my career at McKinsey, where I spent 2 years doing the run-of-the-mill consulting work across a number of industries and geographies and sectors, and then went on to join a company called Generation, which spun out of McKinsey, also focused at closing the skills gap. So have been passionate and interested in education since really early on, and have now been playing a more formal role for the last 10 years.
I would love to dive in on just like how you got to this path because like I'm, even looking back, you had actually co-founded a nonprofit around hearing impaired, and then also with the director of special projects at LA Unified School District. So it does feel like education and like aiding and like learning and development has been really like a core part from the get-go. So I'm just curious, like, did you know this before McKinsey? How is this kind of purpose and mission, which is so solid and clear? When did it show up in your life, and how did you know that that's what you really wanted to prioritize?
The passion for education really started quite early. As a family, we moved around quite a bit, and I firsthand saw how big of an impact your neighborhood or your zip code could have on your education experience. And this really sparked my initial interest and passion for education. As a high school student, I worked in and around the education space at an organization that was serving kids with special needs. In college, I collaborated with and I started a nonprofit. I also worked 2 to 3 afternoons a week in the LA Unified Public School System, helping with a number of initiatives, and so have always been interested in education. Through these early experiences, I really became a bit discouraged by how big of a job it is to fix the K-12 system, or even really just narrow the educational disparities there. It's just such a complex system, and while I'm really proud to be at a company now that's actively investing in companies trying to fix a lot of these disparities, personally I've really started to gravitate towards career education and higher education, and have always just been so inspired by the fact that no matter where you grew up or where you went to school, if you could land a great first job, your trajectory was so much stronger than it would be otherwise. And so for me, it felt much more manageable to be able to focus on this part of the education system than start by addressing a lot of things that are just a lot more complex and challenging to overcome. And so senior year, I had two great job offers, one from McKinsey, one from Teach for America, and ultimately ended up joining McKinsey with the hopes of being able to learn a lot, grow a lot, and pick up the right tools to be able to then shift to a career of addressing some of these workforce discrepancies. I spent 2 years doing just that. I worked across industries and geographies, and for employers that never in a million years I thought I'd be working with. And on the back end of my 2 year career there, I joined a company called Generation, which is a nonprofit that actually spun out of McKinsey, that is focused on closing the skills gap across a number of different countries, and the US being one of them. And had such a great experience there. It was professionally one of the hardest years ever, but it also really cemented my passion and interest for this space. I had a really important takeaway though, which was that you could be doing really great work, but in the nonprofit space, no matter how big of an impact you were driving, it often did mean that you were constantly chasing new money just to support the operations. And so left both encouraged, but also with more clarity that I wanted to find more sustainable business models where I could still do good, but also do well. And I never really imagined being able to marry my passion for education with another passion that I had, which is investing. I owe a lot of that passion to my dad. He's had a very colored, cool career across investing and entrepreneurship and as an executive. And really from a young age nurtured an interest in investing. When I was probably 6 or 7 years old, he gave me and then subsequently my brothers a seed investment and helped us pick a stock and ultimately selected Microsoft, which 25 years ago was a very good pick. And while that investment decision was certainly more luck than it was an informed investment decision, it really did show me firsthand just how powerful investing can be. And so I feel very lucky to be able to marry both my interest for education as well as investing.
Can you touch on a little bit of like, as you've been exploring the space of education, what the most interesting thing you've learned is that you'd want to share?
There is a very pronounced skills gap in the United States, which is stemming from the mismatch between what you're learning in the traditional classroom and what you actually need to know to be successful in the job market. And while there are many examples of education systems and institutions that have kept up and been able to match the evolving needs of the job market, the system as a whole really hasn't. On the bright side, the system failure really has spurred a lot of creativity and innovation in newer models, whether that be boot camps or apprenticeships or employer-led programs. There's really been this shift that you don't actually have to go to college in order to get a great degree. And we're starting to see a lot of progressive employers really start to look at a candidate's actual skills versus just their alma mater. And while we still do have quite a bit of ground to cover, I do think that it's been very encouraging just to see a lot of these training programs and employer-led initiatives really take shape and diminish the need of having to go to college and take on a bunch of debt and spend 4 years tied up in a pretty rigid archaic system.
I'd love to hear like a few, whether it's one or a few of like people or companies that are really inspiring you right now and what they're doing.
The first person to come to mind is a woman named April Hansen. She is an RN by training and started her career several years ago working as an RN for a healthcare staffing company. And pretty quickly, she realized that the folks that were running the show and staffing her out on all these assignments were certainly not nurses, and they certainly had never seen a patient a day in their life. And she was a little bit discouraged by just the disconnect between uh, her employer and her actual place of work. And so she went and started her own staffing company and dedicated to really bridging that disconnect and ultimately sold the company and went on to become the chief revenue officer of Aya Health, which is one of the largest healthcare staffing companies in the US today and one of the fastest growing thanks to April. She also is running her own company and has a great platform of encouraging those early and middle of their career really just to find their passion and chase what they're good at. And she's been such a source of inspiration for me, both online and personally. And so would highly recommend following April Hansen. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't highlight one of Achieve's portfolio companies. So the one I'll talk about today is Cloud for Good. Cloud for Good is a Salesforce consultancy that is serving higher education institutions and nonprofit organizations. And we met Tal and his team 2 years ago They're growing really nicely, but one of the recurring struggles that they had was being able to find not only enough talent, but enough talent at a competitive enough rate where they were still able to be profitable. And so we invested in Cloud for Good 2 years ago, and we helped build the first ever registered apprenticeship program in the Salesforce ecosystem, which aims to unlock really high potential talent that is being overlooked and underserved today. And so instead of having to go out and compete with the rest of the industry to find a seasoned consultant at 150 or $200,000, they're able to hire and train in a couple 3 to 4 months a really great Salesforce consultant at a fraction of that price, and give them training, give them a great salary, give them benefits day one, remove a lot of the barriers to entry, and create a really clear path to earning 6 figures in 2 years. And it's been a win across the board. It's been a win for Cloud for Good as a company because they can sustain really great margins while still being able to capitalize on the great growth of the ecosystem. It's a win for these job seekers who, for the first time ever, have a very clear path to earning 6 figures. And it's a win for Cloud for Good customers because they now have this amazing talent pool that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. So we've implemented a strategy like this in a number of our portfolio companies in Workday and healthcare IT and behavioral health and school nursing and web development and software development and a whole host of others, cybersecurity. And we're actively scouting the next investment arena for us. Very interested in ServiceNow and Oracle and SAP, but this strategy really can be applied across a number of both tech and healthcare fields.
I'm curious what your hot take is on where this, education and upskilling world goes, and something that's like more controversial, like that maybe other people might not agree with you on, but that you feel like this is what it's going to look like in the future.
Yeah, the significance of college education is really starting to diminish. Um, when you look at the college for all narrative, it feels very outdated and irrelevant, especially when you layer in the fact that college programs and majors really haven't evolved over the last 20, 30, 40 years. And the cost of college has more than doubled the increase in inflation over the last 40 years. And so while there's a lot of higher ed institutions that are leading to really positive and favorable outcomes, pushing every high school graduate through the college for all narrative really is just not realistic and really counterproductive both for employers and for students. The positive side, there are a lot of more employer-led and employer-inspired pathways that have started to come out as a result of this, the lacking of what the higher education system is producing. Apprentices, although they don't make up a huge chunk yet, they're certainly great gaining traction. You have coding boot camps and you have self-paced learning initiatives. And then also too, really interestingly, is you have these employer-led programs where employers are really starting to see and recognize the benefit in investing in their own workforce, whether that be upskilling or reskilling. And so while it's not ideal that higher education hasn't really kept up with the needs of the workforce, we've really started to see too some positives that have stemmed from that.
And what are your thoughts on some of the more like controversial levers around like universal basic income, the role of like AI, and then maybe even the topic of income share agreements?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with income share agreements. So for those of you that aren't familiar, income share agreements or ISAs are contracts between colleges, training companies, or students that are basically saying the cost of tuition or part of the cost of tuition is covered if students commit to paying a portion of their postgraduate earnings for a predetermined period of time. ISAs are very compelling in that they are really aligning the training programs with the student outcomes. So employers are really, or programs are really putting their money where their mouth is. The momentum is really starting to wane there around those. So for a long time, there was no legislation around those programs, and there were a lot of bad actors and unfortunate events that happened. And when legislation did catch up, it was too little, too late. And so there's really not going to be a world where ISAs play a meaningful role in the workforce. A more interesting model is around employer pay models. So if there is a positive ROI on upskilling, which often there is, employers should, and in many cases are, willing to front the cost there. And so I think as you look at what's to come over the next 10 years, I think the employer pay model is much more likely to gain momentum than any other creative student payment approaches. On AI, it's a bit of a loaded question. So the influence of AI is undoubtedly going to reshape how we learn and how we work, and in often cases, it's going to be much more accessible and equitable. It's certainly going to challenge us how we think about education and employment today, but the bigger question is how and when that's going to happen. And so when trying to answer these questions, you have a very widespread range of opinions. On one side, you have a lot of these industry giants like IBM and McKinsey saying that there's going to be change, but it's going to be rather slow over the next 5 years. So IBM's quote to kick off their workforce report was, AI is not going to replace people, but people who use AI are going to replace those who don't. And similarly, McKinsey only estimates that 1 in 4 jobs over the next 5 years are going to incorporate AI. So while both of these employers know that the wave of AI is coming and it's going to change, they do think it's going to be a little bit slower. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the World Economic Forum, which is issuing a very stark warning that close to 85 million jobs are likely to be completely replaced by some sort of automation. And so while no one really knows where it's going to land, based on what I see in the workforce, I do tend to agree more with the McKinseys and IBMs of the world. And I do think that there is going to be a wider skills gap before it starts to narrow. And that's going to be true in either situation. I think as we look at what the future of career launches and socioeconomic mobility looks like, I think very much the pathways that are adaptable and flexible and really married to the workforce are the ones that are going to win. And so while I hope higher education catches up and adapts, I have a lot more confidence in apprenticeships, and other employer-led initiatives as they have proven to be a little bit more adaptable and flexible than higher education systems have been over the last 20 years.
How do your LPs or investors in the fund think about returns while also, this set of capping things like returns, like not getting 10x because that's, deemed to be sort of egregious? How does that balance out?
This is a good question. It's tough. It's good. So there is a misperception that driving impact means sacrificing returns, especially in the context of private equity and venture capital. Over the last 10 or so years, there has been quite a bit of research that comes out that has underscored both the financial and societal impacts of impact investing. But despite these insights, impact funds are still fighting an uphill battle when they're trying to persuade prospective LPs that you can embrace both impact and financial objectives. There's been a lot of progress that's been made, but we're certainly not there yet. As for my fund, Achieve is first and foremost a private equity firm, which means that we have fiduciary duties to maximize returns. But beyond our financial goals, all of our team is really passionate and dedicated to driving positive impact in education and workforce. And thankfully, all of our limited partners, or our LPs, share this dedication. And so as a result, almost every investment, or really every investment decision, involves a really critical analysis of what the financial return could be, but also what are the other non-financial considerations, and we evaluate those on a case-by-case basis. We are employing a pretty distinct investment strategy that really is inherently solving for societal change, and we haven't ever seen that at the sake of a financial return. So for us, every new apprentice means that we've changed a life, we've better helped a customer by giving them access to new talent that they didn't have otherwise, and it also means that we're increasing our revenue and profit. And so for our portfolio companies, increasing the number of trained apprentices is also increasing the profits that they have. And so you're not picking a specific strategy to strive behind, or a specific metric. You're able to really solve hand in hand both impact and profit. And so for us, targeting a 10x return is not bad. Achieving a return like this means that we've changed, we've been able to change 10x the number of lives and serve 10x the number of customers, and giving our customers a talent base that they wouldn't otherwise have. A third of our or 2/3 of our apprentices now are from underrepresented communities, and that's significantly outperforming the current tech space. And so across the board, we're able to drive really positive societal changes while making a return. So balancing impact and ethical concerns and financial returns, that really does vary fund to fund. But at Achieve, we really believe that prioritizing the well-being of job seekers and students is the best long-term approach. And we are always aiming to be on the right side of history. But this mindset has yet to clash with our ability to achieve really top quintile results.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on just like resources or places to get started in this world of like reinventing yourself and upskilling. I think one is a sort of like classic quarter life crisis, right? It's like this 25-year-old who's like making a pivot.
Yeah.
And then I think there's also quite a few who are like post like first few years of motherhood who are like trying to get back into the game. And we know that there's sort of a steep drop off like in professional earning and potential when that happens, for better or worse. So like how to get back into that momentum. And then the last one that I see a lot actually is sort of this like later stage career, like reinventing and feeling like they maybe have been doing a lot of more traditional things, and there could be expectation even to like almost retire, and then them trying to sort of reinvent like what are they doing and working on, in a kind of post-retirement world, when maybe they're not ready to retire, they don't want to, and maybe they even want to jump into like sort of startups or like new emerging trends. So I'm curious if like for each of those three targets, are there resources? Are they the same resources, or any advice you'd give for those cohorts?
First, let me start by thanking you for asking this question. There's a huge amount of talent, both in older job seekers as well as new parents or parents looking to re-enter the workforce. And there's not nearly enough resources out there, but I'm happy to give a couple pieces of advice. So I think just broadly speaking, our generation has the really unique privilege of being able to pursue flexible, creative, and authentic careers. And I challenge everyone to really invest the time up front in discovering what the intersection of their passions and their skills really is. Not every artist is going to be able to make the is not going to be able to sustain this question is so perfectly timed, is not going to be able to sustain a living solely by being an artist. But every artist does have great competencies and workforce preferences that they can align to the workforce. And so being able to really invest in what makes you tick is going to pay dividends, whether that be I want to pursue a career that's impact investment, and maybe that means that I'm sacrificing on salary, or I'm sacrificing on flexibility, or I want to be an artist in my free time, and that means I need to solve for a career that lends itself to that flexibility. And so really just figuring out what is the right intersection of your passions and what you need to be able to fully live out your authentic life. For those that are later in their career, I really encourage you just to embrace your age. You have decades of wisdom and experience and time practicing your communication and your collaboration skills, and lean into those skills, because that's a lot of time that a lot of our generation and the younger workforce doesn't have. There was a great stat that I saw come out today that 89% of the surveyed hiring managers, and this was 1,500 hiring managers, said that learners of age 45 and over were just as capable at picking up new topics as their younger peers. And so just use this as encouragement that just because you are on the older side certainly doesn't discount your ability to learn new things and contribute to the workforce meaningfully. For new moms re-entering the workforce, I would just encourage you to really lean in on a lot of the capabilities and skills that you picked up while staying at home. You, as a stay-at-home mom, you were never off. You just were working in a different capacity. And so you were able to pick up skills, problem solving and collaborating and communicating effectively with tough clients. Hopefully you were delegating, and all of these lend itself really well into the workforce. There's been a ton of companies that have recognized how challenging and intimidating it can be to re-enter. And so a lot of these companies have launched what's called a returnship. And so this is a paid internship that is really focused on mid-career adults re-entering the workforce after a period of time at home. And some of these employers are Goldman Sachs, Amazon, HubSpot, JP Morgan Chase. There's a ton more that all really recognize the value of this population and have been able to launch a formal program accordingly. There's also great organizations out there. One's called the Mom Project, where it's connecting parents that are returning to work with great job opportunities. And so certainly check those out. I think my biggest piece of advice, though, is trying to be more proactive. And so if you are considering stepping into motherhood or parenthood in the next 3 to 5 years, really be thoughtful about who you're working for. It is so much easier, and there is so much less friction to return to the workforce when you do have that support. And there are a lot of great employers out there. And if your current employer is not one of them that will be supportive, then I encourage you to leave now and get a couple of years of tenure at that new employer before you start thinking about becoming a parent.
Thank you so much. And how can we follow you and Achieve as you're publishing things? I know you share a lot of research and also some of your impact reports. How can we follow along your journey and what you guys do next?
LinkedIn is certainly the easiest tool and way to stay connected. I've met so many interesting, really cool people on that platform, and I'm always looking to connect with more folks. So please reach out to me there. As for the work that I'm doing with Achieve Partners, one of the founders, Ryan Craig, releases a newsletter every other week that is highlighting the latest on education and workforce, and takes a topic that most don't think of as super funny and interesting, and finds a way to tell really interesting, witty stories around it. So if you're at all interested in these spaces, I highly recommend it. It's called The Gap Letter.
Thanks so much for everything that you shared and also what you're doing. I think it's so important that we're, creating really meaningful work. So thanks so much, Corinne.
Alana, thank you so much for having me. It was so great to be on here, and hopefully we catch up soon. Thanks.